1 through 34. Every wise woman buildeth her house, but the foolish plucketh it down with her hands. He that walketh in his uprightness feareth the Lord, but he that is perverse in his ways despiseth him. In the mouth of the foolish is a rod of pride, but the lips of the wise shall preserve them. Where no oxen are, the crib is clean, but much increase is by the strength of the ox. A faithful witness will not lie, but a false witness will utter lies. A scorner seeketh wisdom and findeth it not, but knowledge is easy unto him that understandeth. Go from the presence of a foolish man when thou perceivest not in him the lips of knowledge. The wisdom of the prudent is to understand his way, but the folly of fools is deceit. Fools make a mock at sin, but among the righteous there is favor. The heart knoweth his own bitterness, and a stranger doth not intermeddle with his joy. The house of the wicked shall be overthrown, but the tabernacle of the upright shall flourish. There is a way which seemeth right unto a man, but the end thereof are the ways of death. Even in laughter the heart is sorrowful, and the end of that mirth is heaviness. The backslider in heart shall be filled with his own ways, and a good man shall be satisfied from himself. The simple believeth every word, but the prudent man looketh well to his going. A wise man feareth and departeth from evil, but the fool rageth and is content or confident. He that is soon angry dealeth foolishly, and a man of wicked devices is hated. The simple inherit folly, but the prudent are crowned with knowledge. The evil bow before the good, and the wicked at the gates of the righteous. The poor is hated even of his own neighbor, but the rich hath many friends. He that despiseth his neighbor sinneth, but he that hath mercy on the poor, happy is he. Do they not err that devise evil? But mercy and truth shall be to them that devise good. In all labor there is profit, but to the talk of the lips tendeth only to penury. The crown of the righteous is their riches, but the foolishness of fools is folly. A true witness delivereth souls, but a deceitful witness speaketh lies. In the fear of the Lord is strong confidence, and his children shall have a place of refuge. The fear of the Lord is a fountain of life, to depart from the snares of death. In the multitude of people is the king's honor, but in the want of people is the destruction of the prince. He that is slow to wrath is of great understanding, but he that is hasty of spirit exalteth folly. A sound heart is the life of the flesh, but envy the rottenness of the bones. He that oppresseth the poor reproacheth his maker, but he that honoreth him hath mercy on the poor. The wicked is driven away in his wickedness, but the righteous hath hope in his death. Wisdom resteth in the heart of him that hath understanding, but that which is in the midst of fools is made known. Righteousness exalteth a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. The king's favor is toward a wise servant, but his wrath is against him that causeth shame. Now, we read the whole chapter this evening, but we wanted to take a key thought. And there's a lot of good verses in here, and even as I was reading through it this time through, things that I would like to comment on, but maybe not necessarily in keeping with our key thought this evening. But in reading this, I want to take verse 12 as our key verse. There is a way which seemeth right unto a man, but the end thereof are the ways of death. And our thought or theme as we study this evening, the 14th chapter here of Proverbs, is that God gives us wisdom to discern and walk in the right way, which rewards us with a good, prosperous, and abundant life. Fools, however, are and continue in their foolishness to their own hurt and destruction. There is a way which seemeth right unto man. The scriptures we've also read that a man's ways are right in his own eyes. We read in Jeremiah where the heart is deceitful above all things and terribly wicked. Who can know it? Because of the deceitfulness of sin and the deceitfulness of our own heart and the deceitfulness of lust, man is easily convinced of the rightness of his way even when it is wrong. And it takes the wisdom that God gives us, and that's one of the things that the entire book of Proverbs is about, is teaching us wisdom. And to be able to discern between right and wrong. And to be able to discern what is the right way. These things are learned and revealed to us by God. Notice, if you will, in Matthew chapter 7. Matthew chapter 7, part of the Sermon on the Mount, verse 24. Jesus makes this comment and observation. He said, "Therefore, whosoever heareth these sayings of mine and doeth them." Those two things together. They hear, and that has the idea of understanding, receiving it, believing it, and doeth them. We're not just be hearers of the word, but also doers. As we said, God gives us wisdom to discern and to walk in the right way. Not only to be able to identify what is right and to recognize it, but also the grace, the strength to choose to do that which is right and to walk in the right way. He says, "Therefore, whosoever heareth these sayings of mine and doeth them, I will liken him unto a wise man which built his house upon a rock. And the rain descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew, and beat upon that house, and it fell not, for it was founded upon a rock. And every one that heareth these sayings of mine and doeth them not shall be likened unto a foolish man which built his house upon the sand. And the rain descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat upon the house, and it fell, and great was the fall of it." And how that illustration and that parable that Jesus gives there parallels the book of Proverbs and our thoughts this evening particularly. The wise man built his house upon a rock. That is, he heard and obeyed the Word of God, the sayings of God. In Proverbs 14 verse 1, every wise woman buildeth her house. And here again, wisdom, through the book of Proverbs, wisdom many times is personified as a woman. Jesus said, "A wise man built his house upon a rock." Every wise woman buildeth her house. We see here Proverbs 31, not to get too far ahead, but Proverbs 31 describes for us the virtuous woman and describes how she runs and manages her household. Titus talks about the young women, the wives, they learn to love their husband, be chaste, keepers at home. They are the managers, the overseers of the home. Psalm 127 verse 1 tells it, except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. And so we come back here to the idea of wisdom. Unless we build according to the Word of God. And a house here can have many applications and ideas. Our life, our homes, our way of life, the Lord's church, all these things. Except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. And so many times in Proverbs we see that comparison made and talked about vanity. And that term vanity is used alongside, the foolish, the wicked, and so on, the vain person. And so they labor in vain that build it. There is a way which seemeth right unto man. And I'm sure when the man built his house upon the sand, at the time it seemed like a good idea. A lot of times when people cut corners, and they save a little here, they save a little there, it sounds like a good deal at the time. But when the storms come, and when you compare that to our lives, if our lives are not built on a solid foundation, when the storms of life come, it's going to cause that house to fall. It's going to cause the destruction and the failure of that structure. And so that's the purpose here in our theme and the verses we want to look at here this evening. Verse 4 was one that caught my attention, primarily because my wife had brought this one to my attention some time ago. She liked that. Where no oxen are, the crib is clean. So it's easy to keep the house clean when you don't have any children. That was her application and idea of that. It just struck her as kind of funny. But there is a great message in that verse, and I'm not going to belabor that one this evening. But we must realize that we must put forth an effort to reap the reward. It said, where no oxen are, the crib is clean, but much increase is by the strength of the ox. And so he tells us that we can do all things through Christ who strengthens us. Galatians admonishes us to not be weary in well-doing. We will reap in due season if we faint not. We have to realize, and this is one of the things I believe that in keeping with our theme and thought, there's a way that seemeth right unto man. And sometimes ways to not have to do things, to not have to put out extra effort, may seem good at the time, but anything worth having, we have to expend effort in order to obtain it. It requires effort. And the reward comes when we have labored and we put forth that effort, and we can reap the fruits of that labor. Those fruits, the rewards that we receive, is worth the effort put into it. And that is something that we need to learn. That is some wisdom there that we need to learn and avoid the idea of trying to cut corners and not have to work and labor for the things that we do. Just by way of verse 23 said, in all labor there is profit. He says, but the talk of the lips tendeth only to penury. So we need to put forth the effort. Verse 7. Here's another word of wisdom to help us along the way. He says, go from the presence of a foolish man when thou perceiveth not in him the lips of knowledge. You know, when you realize that, you know, by the words that they speak, the things that they say, the philosophies they espouse, that it's in error, it is foolishness. He said, get away from them. You know, don't continue in the fellowship. Well, he said, can two walk together except they be agreed? And when someone starts espousing and talking the foolishness, he says, go from the presence, go from their presence, get away from them. You know, you do not need to expose yourself to that. You do not need to listen to that. Ephesians 5:11. He says, and, well, verse 10 says, proving what is acceptable unto the Lord, and have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather reprove them. No, have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness. And as a man speaketh, what he's speaking, well, it says, out of the heart proceeds the issues of life. He's revealing what's in his heart, and he's revealing his attitude. And so the type of works that he's going to engage in are going to be the unfruitful works of darkness that don't have any fellowship with that. Just, you know, when you perceive from their lips and what they're saying that they're speaking foolishness, depart, get away from them. Many other scriptures, you know, have, you know, be not unequally yoked together with unbelievers and so on. Come out from among them and be ye separate, saith the Lord. This is what this verse, I believe, is teaching us. Go from the presence of a foolish man, and thou perceivest not in him the lips of knowledge. See, when you perceive that he's not speaking according to knowledge, then that identifies him as a foolish man, and you need to get away from him. Verse 9 is another one, another way of indicating and identifying to us the foolish. That fools make a mock at sin. Fools make a mock at sin. You know, when you try to tell someone, that's wrong, that is sin. And there's people that just laugh and scorn the idea that something is sin. They have this idea of there are no absolutes. There's no absolute right and wrong. Everything's relative. You know, what might be wrong for you can be right for this person over here. And they try to explain it away. And when they try to explain away sin, when God calls something sin, then we need to go with what God says about it. And people that make a mock of that also make a mock of God's word. They scorn his word. And when, you know, this reveals to us the person's character, their heart. And that helps us to identify where they are coming from. In verse 12, that was our key verse. There is a way which seemeth right unto man, but the end thereof are the ways of death. And so we talked about that there is a way that seemeth right. He said, but the end thereof is the ways of death. Proverbs 16:25 repeats that statement. There is a way that seemeth right unto man, but the end thereof are the ways of death. And so we need to beware and seek God's leadership. That's why he says, lean not to thine own understanding, but acknowledge him in all thy ways, and he will direct thy paths. See, when we are walking in the path that God lays out for us and describes for us and tells us, this is the way, walk ye in it, he's not going to lead us into sin. his path is not going to be the way of death. And so we need to be aware of that and acknowledge that. Verse 15 is not one of them that I have marked, but it's one of them that really needs some comment on. The simple believeth every word, but the prudent man looketh well to his going. In other words, he really checks it out. The simple believeth every word. There are so many cons, shysters, deceivers in the world. And they come up with all these different schemes and things. And they can sound so good. And what he's saying is the simple believeth everything they hear. And you've probably met people like that, especially if you can find it in print, see it on the internet. They believe every word of it. They hear it in the news or whatever. The simple believeth every word. He says, but the prudent man looketh well. In other words, he really checks it out first. Before believing something, check it out. Verse 16. A wise man feareth and departeth from evil, but the fool rageth and is confident. The wise man feareth and departeth from evil. One of the things that described Job was that he feared God and eschewed evil. This is something which identifies the saved person, the wise person, is that they fear God. And the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. I mean, that's the very foundation of wisdom, to have a reverence and a fear of the Almighty. That's the beginning of wisdom. And then from that proceeds, when he speaks, we listen. When he tells us something's right, we believe it's right. When he says something's wrong, we believe it's wrong. It stems from the fact that we have this fear, this knowledge of who God is, and we have a healthy respect for that, a reverential fear, and just a good old-fashioned fear of God's anger, His wrath, His punishment when we are disobedient. Even as a child of God, we should fear the hand of God in chastisement, that He will and is able to chastise us. And so he says, fear, the wise man feareth and departeth from evil. He said, but the fool rageth and is confident. The fool is confident in his own devices. The fool, he utters foolishness. He does that which is right in his own eyes, and he's confident in the rightness of what he's doing. He's confident in the outcome of what he's doing. An example of that is the man that says, I am the captain of my own destiny. Now, he's being foolish, but he is confident in himself. He's confident in his abilities. He's confident in the things that he's doing. And it's foolish because there are very few things in life that we really have control over. There are so many things outside of us that influences and impacts and can change the whole direction that we intend to go in. How many times things have turned out badly and people's excuse, well, I didn't intend for that to happen. There are too many things that we have no idea and no control over. But this attitude, by my own hand and my own strength, Have I gotten this wealth and this power? That is foolishness. In Daniel chapter 4, we have Nebuchadnezzar, and he was actually warned ahead of time. I mean, Nebuchadnezzar had been shown some things in a dream, and he recognized the God. And but in Revelation, or in Daniel chapter 4, in verse 27, he says, "Wherefore, O king, let my counsel be acceptable unto thee, and break off thy sins by righteousness, and thine iniquities by showing mercy to the poor." And then that's something that's mentioned over and over in Proverbs, and even in this proverb. "If it may be a lengthening of thy tranquility," as this came upon the king Nebuchadnezzar. And at the end of 12 months, he walked in the palace of the kingdom of Babylon. The king spake and said, "Is not this great Babylon that I have built for the house of the kingdom by the might of my power and for the honor of my majesty?" Oh, he was lifted up in pride. He said, haven't I gotten this by my own hand? You know, by my strength, by my power, haven't I created this and built this nation and everything? The king, and verse 31, "While the word was in the king's mouth, there fell a voice from heaven saying, O King Nebuchadnezzar, to thee it is spoken, the kingdom is departed from thee." The very thing that was prophesied that would happen, happened. He was lifted up. And finally, in verse 34, says, "At the end of the days I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted up my eyes into heaven, and mine understanding returned unto me. And I blessed the Most High, and I praised and honored him that liveth forever, whose dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom is from generation to generation. And all the inhabitants of the earth are reputed as nothing. And he doeth according to his will in the army of heaven and among the inhabitants of the earth, and none can stay his hand or say unto him, What doest thou?" He came to realize some things there. He said, by showing mercy to the poor, as I said, that's mentioned several times in this chapter, Proverbs 14:21. He says, "He that despiseth his neighbor sinneth, but he that hath mercy on the poor, happy is he." Verse 31 also, "He that oppresseth the poor reproacheth his maker, but he that honoreth him," that is, who honors his maker, "hath mercy on the poor." And so we see here this wisdom. We see in verse 22, "Do they not err that devise evil? But mercy and truth shall be to them that devise good." We already mentioned verse 23, "In all labor there is profit, but the talk of the lips standeth only to penury." Verse 27, "The fear of the Lord is a fountain of life, to depart from the snares of death." And that's right, that God gives us wisdom, and the beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord, to choose the right path. Verse 30 is an interesting one, and kind of from a medical standpoint, said, "A sound heart is the life of the flesh." You know, how many times people ask, how's your heart, what's your blood pressure, talking about these things that have to do with the heart and the circulation. Leviticus says the life of the flesh is in the blood, but the heart is what pumps the blood and circulates the blood through the body. That's what keeps the blood moving. The life of the flesh is in the blood. It's the heart that keeps that blood circulating through the body. And so a sound heart is the life of the flesh. And that's the reason we pay a lot of attention to the heart. But this is true too of a spiritual nature and our spiritual health as well. Pure heart, you see. Singleness of heart. How many times it speaks about the heart? He said, but envy. And notice, a sound heart is the life of the flesh, but envy, the rottenness of the bones. Again, we see this idea of how things affect our physical body. And envy. You know, envy is a heart issue. Not the physical muscle that pumps the blood, but that core of our being where our emotions and our will and our thoughts and all reside. Envy is a heart issue. It's a heart problem. And it says it's the rottenness of the bones. So a sound heart, not just physically but also spiritually, is the life. And then finally, in verse 34, righteousness exalteth the nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. And so we kind of come back and summarize our thoughts. Righteousness, the right way, will lift up and exalt, or cause a people to be exalted. They'll cause a nation to be exalted. And so whether we're applying this to the building of a house, the building of a home, the structuring of our life, the building of a nation, to do right. To do right. Righteousness exalteth a nation. Now, we said and quoted said, except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. In Proverbs 24, verse 3 says, through wisdom is a house builded, and by understanding it is established, and by knowledge shall the chambers be filled with all precious and pleasant riches. And so these three things that are constantly brought up in the book of Proverbs: wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. So by wisdom is a house builded. By understanding, it is established or perpetuated. By knowledge shall the chambers be filled with all precious and pleasant riches. So summary, as we look at this and back to our key verse, there is a way which seemeth right unto man, but the end thereof are the ways of death. Don't follow the easy path. Don't follow the common path or the most popular path. But seek the right path. And we seek it by looking to God's Word. Seek the right path wherein is the good way. Note Jeremiah 6:16, then Matthew 7. Jeremiah 6:16. Thus saith the Lord, stand ye in the ways and see. In other words, look at all the different paths, all the different ideas as to how to live your life, all the different philosophies of life. It says, stand ye in the ways and see and ask for the old paths, where is the good way, and walk therein. It says, ask for the old ways. And if we ask God to show us, He will reveal these things to us in His Word. That comes back. And that's what Solomon's trying to do here. for His Son, and God through Him for His people, is to teach us and to show us and give us the wisdom to be able to discern the right and wrong and good and evil and what is the right way. He said, ask for the old paths, where is the good way, and walk therein. And ye shall find rest for your souls. And that's the promise all through Proverbs here. Over in Matthew chapter 7, verse 13, he said, enter ye at the strait gate, for wide is the gate, and broad is the way that leadeth to destruction. And many there be which go in thereat. There is a way that seemeth right unto man, but the end thereof are the ways, plural, of death. And here he says, it's a broad way. I mean, it encompasses everything. And so all these ideas, and man is right in the extent that in referring to all these ways of men, they're all going to lead them to the same place. But that's not the place that we want to get to. There's a way that seemeth right to man, but the end thereof are the ways of death. He said here, broad is the way that leadeth to destruction, and many there be which go in thereat, because strait is the gate, and narrow is the way that leadeth to life, and few there be that find it. That's what he said. You stop, you consider. Don't just believe everything you hear, but you consider and seek God's will and ask Him. He says, you stand and you consider all these ways and consider your ways, and ask God and seek for His wisdom that He might give you to discern between right and wrong, good and evil, and what is the right way. And when He reveals to you and shows you the old paths, the right way, walk in it. You're saved. Don't just follow the easy path, the common path, the most popular path, but seek the right path, which he says is the good way. All right.